All right, welcome everyone. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar on getting started with security operations applications. I hope everyone's doing well and thank you for being here. I'm Sarah Wood and I work in the outbound product management team within security operations at ServiceNow, located in the New York, New Jersey area. And I'm really excited to be joined by Andy from the outbound product management team, who will be presenting today as well. And Pete is also here from OPM. So we're excited to be here for this time to really support you in your implementation journey. Um, we aren't planning to cover any forward-looking statements, but in case we do have our standard safe harbor notice that applies to this presentation. And this webinar today is part of the Live on ServiceNow events program. So we'd encourage you to keep an eye out for future events in the community where we post them. For example, we do have a security operations office hours session coming up. I believe it's on November 20th. And that's a really great place. It's an open forum for you to get any questions answered or discuss any topics with each other or with the product management team and other experts. So please do register and join us if you're interested in that. And we have a series of best practices webinar. I believe Pete will be sharing the link to those in the chat. Those webinars are really great, deeper dives into the product areas. So definitely check those out. And before we do get to the agenda today, I just want to remind you that we're here to answer your questions throughout. So please use the Q&A button in the Zoom controls at the bottom of your screen to submit questions throughout the session. And when we have some time at the end, we'll definitely get to those. This is a recorded webinar, so the recording will be posted in the community to revisit or to share with team members or anyone else afterwards. And lastly, at the end of the session, once we close it out and you leave, you should receive a quick survey that will appear in your browser. We'd really appreciate if you could take a minute to complete that so we can get your feedback and help us improve for future events. I do see someone's raised their hand, so feel free to put anything in the chat as well if you wanted to share anything throughout the session. And we'll definitely respond to you there. And when we do our live Q&A, you can certainly come off mute and ask questions live as well. This is our planned agenda for today. Most importantly, we want you to come away from this with a clear idea of your next steps toward your security operations implementation and various resources that will help you get there. So really our goal is to support you and to provide you with relevant resources to help you ensure a successful start to your implementation. We do run these sessions monthly, so stay tuned. Join us for another one if you know you have to drop early, or if you have questions that you might want to ask on a different stage of your implementation, whatever it might be. We'd love to see you again at future events. So getting right into it, we'll start with a quick overview of security operations, and we'll highlight some key resources in case you want to dive deeper into getting to know the solution space here in security ops. But before we do get right in, I'm going to launch our first poll. This is just a general poll in terms of what are you planning to implement. So we're really interested to hear. We're going to talk both about the security incident response side of the portfolio and the vulnerability response side. So those being our two sort of flagship products. And of course, there's many other solutions within those two areas, but those are kind of what we focus on and what people tend to start with in their implementations. So interested to see where people's interest lies. And if there's another area that you're more focused on, feel free to share that in the chat. We'd love to hear. So we're going to wrap that up in a few seconds here and share that out. And give it one more second. All right, excellent. Thanks for the great responses there. So, some interested in security incident response, vulnerability response. Most people, though, really interested in both, which makes a lot of sense. Great, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about both, and hopefully you come away sort of with some new information after this. So moving right along, as many of you know, the security operations portfolio includes a suite of different solutions that generally sort of fit into these two broad areas. So on the one side, we have, the ability to respond to vulnerabilities across cyber attack surfaces. And this is really largely achieved through our vulnerability management solutions, which includes VR or vulnerability response, as well as application and container VR. And it covers just a range of areas which are also addressed through different offerings. So, your cloud vulnerabilities, you've got your misconfigurations, and then on the other side, we have the ability to respond to incidents across enterprise security functions. And this is being largely achieved through our enterprise security case management and SOAR solution, which is security incident response. And within that, we also have our threat intelligence solution, data loss prevention incident response, major security incident response, and others. So really different solutions that meet different types of use cases. And at the bottom there, you'll see this sort of security intelligence layer, which encompasses a few of our newest products that were released this year, one being security posture control, and then the other one being threat intelligence security center. And so we won't get into too much detail about those, but if you come to office hours, you can definitely show some of those resources. And we also will share some things today, like our demo channel on YouTube, where you can get a nice overview of those. I'll also just call out that we recently in the Xanadu release, we released our first generative AI offering in security operations, and that was our Now Assist for SecOps. And that is in the security incident response side of the house. So where you can get things like incident summarization in the click of a button, closure notes, and really more exciting things coming in the next release. So again, we usually cover a little bit more of that when we do our office hours. So feel free to join those and look into some of the resources that we'll be sharing throughout. And again, so our security operations solutions do enable a number of different enterprise workflows to take place across SecOps. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these really fall into these two categories. So your attack surface management being your applications and tools that help you anticipate and understand and close your vulnerabilities. And then you have your enterprise security case management, which are your applications and tools that help you move quicker to respond to security incidents in your environment. And so one thing I would add and just encourage you to do is to just check with your account team to ensure you really know sort of what you're entitled to in your security operations solutions. For instance, with vulnerability response, you could also have access to application vulnerability response and container vulnerability response and SBOM. And, on the SIR side, your major security incident management, which is really purpose built for those major security incidents like your ransomware and things like that. So check in with your account team, find out what you're entitled to, and see where you sort of want to start. Andy will be talking more about the implementation side of things, but always good to know what is out there and what is available to you. And just briefly, like high level view of kind of workflows in both security incident response and VR. Here we're looking at security incident response, or SIR. We really unlock automation and workflows in SIR that enable us to respond to incidents faster. And this looks at a very high level of that process, but essentially by integrating your different security and SIM tools, you are able to have one central system of action to view and prioritize your alerts and incidents, along with having that sort of native connection to your CMDB within ServiceNow, which really allows you to understand business context and prioritize security incidents better. And next, having the ability to integrate with different threat intelligence tools helps you enrich incidents to further better organize and orchestrate response actions. and direct those right from within SIR, as well as having post-incident workflows like completing post-incident reviews and configurable reports. So that's a high-level look at that side of the house. And then coming to the attack surface management side, which is vulnerability response or VR, that's really giving you that visibility into your vulnerabilities, ability to prioritize and automate those across the enterprise. So across, as we said, infrastructure, cloud, application. And this really starts with integrating all of your different scanners, setting up vulnerability calculators and assignment rules to enable automatic risk scoring and grouping of vulnerabilities, as well as assignment to the right teams across security and IT. And in addition, we have solution recommendations and patch orchestration right within VR, as well as workflows for reassignments and for requesting exceptions and deferrals, which can connect with our integrated risk management solution at ServiceNow. And lastly, having rescans to confirm whether vulnerabilities have been remediated and close them out and sort of close that loop. So again, very high level view, but hopefully helps set the stage for today's session. Really understanding security operations solutions is a great first step in your implementation so that you can ensure that you're targeting the right outcomes and functionality and prioritizing what you want in your specific environment. And so these different resources that we'll just briefly highlight and go through will help your team get up to speed and continue to remain informed about the different applications and all the things that are new. So first, really key go-to place, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Maybe you have it bookmarked. If not, would definitely recommend doing so. That's our product documentation or our docs site. And this is where you're going to find all the latest product information and release notes, as well as other helpful content such as setup guides and instructions on learning about your entitlements, which we'll be sharing those links in the chat. And then when you're also logged in your account, you can tend to see the upcoming release once those docs become available. So here we have Xanadu. With our next release, you'll start to be able to see those release notes as well. Second here, we've got our community, demo and video resources. So one of those resources being our community YouTube channel, where we've got a bunch of different videos. We always post new demo videos there of different solutions. So that's a great place to just get that high level view of different solutions across the SecOps portfolio. And then here we've also got product demos in Demo Center. So you can sign up to attend a live demonstration of different solutions by going to Demo Center. So lots of demo resources out there. We definitely encourage you to take advantage of those. And that'll be a great resource for team members to get up to speed on the SecOps applications at a high level. Next, our Now Learning platform. This is where your team can use learning credits towards virtual on-demand or instructor-led courses and obtain different certifications that will help enable your implementation and use of SecOps apps. So we have regularly updated SecOps fundamentals, as well as SIR and VR implementer courses and different learning paths across both. And on the right here, you see a screenshot of a community post that we have that contains a curated list of SecOps specific and general ServiceNow training that we think is really relevant to security operations customers. So that's a great sort of place to get to all the different training that you might want to look at. Some of it is free, some of it requires learning credits, which you tend to get when you buy SecOps applications. So look into whether you've got them and how that all works. But some great resources out there for sure to take a deeper dive into SecOps and getting enabled on that. And here, the next one that we want to just showcase briefly is our SecOps community. And so this is your go-to place where you've got users that use SecOps from around the world. You can share resources, best practices, post questions to get solutions from ServiceNow experts, those being customers, partners, ServiceNow employees, product management members. People are often on there answering questions. It's very useful as you get going with your implementation. And we also regularly post resources there, which we can share with you, these links to these quick start guides that we have. We have more quick start guides coming soon, so stay tuned for those. And then we have recently upgraded the user interface to what you see here, and it's a lot easier to find content and pull it up. So definitely check it out if you don't have an account, create your account. And another great page to bookmark. This is also where we post our different upcoming events like this one. So stay tuned. You can also subscribe there and get some nice digestible emails if you'd like to stay tuned on all the things that are going on in SecOps. And lastly, here we have our ServiceNow developer site. And so this is our developer ecosystem, which is a great resource for your more technical team members, but also is open to all levels of individuals. It includes more technical documentation, and it's also where your team can sign up for our free developer program where they can collaborate with other ServiceNow developers and also gain access to a personal developer sandbox instance. And that's where they can play around with different applications and experiment with them on the Now platform. So that kind of covers the first high-level section there. And now I'm going to hand it over to Andy to do a little bit more of a focus on the implementation side of things.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, excited to be here. And, we're going to talk about, approaching your SecOps implementation journey. And I think to kick us off, we do have a poll. And, we're looking at where are you in your implementation journey? Is it something around the corner here? Is it something perhaps in the next year, unknown or other? Let us know in the chat.
Great. Still got some responses coming in, so I'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds. All right, I will probably go ahead and close that poll out. Thanks, everyone. Share that with you all. Okay, back to you, Andy.
Awesome. Very cool. So it definitely looks like we got quite a few folks looking to at least start their journey around the corner here. So if we move to the next slide, there's a couple options to, approaching that implementation journey. A number of different ways you could look at this. We have the ServiceNow, expert services, right? Our team of consultants that have been implementing all of the applications within SecOps. We also have implementation partners. We generally want to see folks that have their implementation certifications out there, but a lot of the partners have numerous, implementations across all the applications that we have in different industries. We also have what's sort of a hybrid, right? The co-delivery model, where essentially the partner, right, would be driving, but we do have a resource from the ServiceNow export services team, at least participating in some of those, maybe the requirement gathering workshop, the early stages, the middle of the journey, or throughout the entire journey of that implementation. And then over to the right, self-implementation is another option on the table there. And as we think about implementing SecOps, Some of us may already be aware, but there's a number of different, sub applications or sub workflows, right? So we have vulnerability response, and as Sarah mentioned underneath that, right, there's different flavors, right? There's, application, cloud container, right, configuration compliance, and also for, security incidents, right? There's threat intelligence, and where we generally see customers, having success is taking an iterative approach, right? Starting off with a strong, foundation and iterating forward, building on top of that, looking for incremental wins, right? Generally, this is a much better approach than sort of a big bang type of approach and adoption. And here we see for vulnerability response, right? Sometimes we do refer to this as attack surface management, the maturity stages. Generally, we see, shops starting off, very manual, right? Taking the exports out of scanners, working in spreadsheets, kind of throwing findings over the fence to the remediation teams, and then gradually shifting right, right? As you work in ServiceNow, vulnerability response, having those findings at least brought in, and you're starting to assign them to the correct remediation teams on a best effort basis. And ServiceNow VR being that, one-stop shop, right, single system of record, that's where we go to see our findings. That's where we go to see who's working on what. And as we kind of continue shifting right, improved experiences, right, for the remediation teams, being able to actually tie in to maybe our change management system, our exception management system, and actually putting a life cycle right around vulnerability management in ServiceNow, and actually leveraging where possible some of the great business data that we might have in CMDB, right, to drive better prioritization, to drive better decision making. And for security incident response, the enterprise case management side, very similar, initially starting off with maybe, emails, working off, hey, I need you to go reimage this host, gradually moving into ServiceNow, using the actual case management functionality to be able to track our work, track, notable alerts that have popped up. And as we start to look at integrating with tools out there, right, very common is integrating with a SIM tool, and being able to bring those aggregated security alerts into ServiceNow, and then automating, right, automating the assignment, the categorization, the prioritization of those. And as we start to think about additional, right, maturity on top of that, we have capabilities like playbooks, right? So you may start to say, here's my common, responses for malware, for phishing, right? For ransomware, for network related reconnaissance, type of events. And here are the common steps that we want our security teams to follow, and putting some automation around that. That automation can then extend into actual what we call orchestration. So being able to say, hey, I want to create a call to my firewall tool to start thinking about monitoring these IPs, or blocking these IPs, sending a file hash to my EDR tool to look at monitoring or blocking, proactively, right? So going from the single system of record, case management, putting some of that automation around the tasks, but then actually moving into the orchestration, or what we call the SOAR part of this. And as we think about implementing vulnerability response, there's some common themes here, right? So initially, we start off with connecting to a vulnerability scanner and slowly bringing in some of the scan data, right? Sometimes, we might have hundreds of thousands or even millions of vulnerability findings. And we just want to start off with a small taste of that data. And we start to see, once we bring this into ServiceNow, right, do we have the corresponding assets in the CMDB? Do we have the teams that would be addressing these vulnerabilities in ServiceNow? And oftentimes we may start with, some of our friendly teams like the Linux team or the Windows Server team, the database team, and start to get some buy-in, start to make sure that, we've got the right experience for them, and then extend that out to other teams in the organization, right? So it's iterative. And if we look at the next slide, got a little bit more detail here. This is what we call like the initial foundation or the core plumbing, right? As I mentioned, connecting with a third-party scanner. That could be something like Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable, and starting to see as I bring these assets over, how do they align, right, to what we have in our CMDB today? And we also have the ability to start normalizing some of that data. So where the vulnerability scanners may not do the best job saying, these are application related, these are OS or platform related, we do have capabilities called classification rules. And then from there, right, our goal is to get these findings assigned to the right team correctly the first time, right, to address and remediate these vulnerabilities. We also have the tooling to actually do prioritization. So we can really tailor that prioritization to our business needs, right? So in addition to, is this vulnerability exploitable? Well, what asset was that vulnerability found on? Is that a crown jewel asset to the company? Is that asset internet facing, right? Or is that perhaps a lower importance type of asset? Maybe it's not connected to the internet, and coming up with a tailored risk score, right, for each of those findings. And then from there, being able to say, well, based on the risk it's presenting, we want to start to drive a goal, right? Do you have 30 days? You have 90 days, right? 180 days to respond to the different flavors of the findings. And this is essentially where we see as our starting point, our foundation, right? We call this the core plumbing. And on the next slide, we have, kind of where we build on top of this, right? So being able to tie into maybe our change management process. So when we start to think about, I need to apply a patch or make a configuration change, doing that aligned, right, to how the business operates. Instituting an exception management process. So we have within VR, right, an exception management process, but where customers also have our IRM solution, right, with policy and exception management, there's an optional tie-in to do your exceptions, right, with IRM there. Planning for, data management, right? Once we bring in hundreds of thousands or millions of vulnerable items, over time, how do we want to manage that, right? As things start to get old, do we want to start thinking about archiving, right? And really formulating that governance and data management strategy. And then looking at, how do we want to monitor our process, right? How are we going to look at, are we sinking? Are we swimming? And looking at reporting. And there's two flavors. There's the standard reporting and also the performance analytics, right? The trending reporting as well. And shifting to security incident response or case management, generally we're really starting off with configuring or thinking about who are our personas, right? Do we have a security analyst team that is a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 structure? Do we just have one team? Do we have to account for any other personas? Maybe we have the HR team involved, or we have a separate team that does forensics, right? The memory dumps, right? Reviewing images, things like that. So just ensuring we have the right personas defined, and then start bringing in some of that security alert data. Like I said, generally that's usually through an integration with a SIM, right? Maybe something like Splunk Enterprise, Splunk Enterprise Security, right? QRadar. Also being able to account for, when we have to manually, right, create security incidents and cases, and then looking at this again from that iterative approach, right? We often find success, thinking of our common use cases, maybe something like phishing, right? And thinking about as these phishing tickets are created, right? Who's involved? What are the common procedures involved there? And then thinking about how are we going to measure our trends, our issues, our success, where we need to improve, and that's through reporting. One call out here, orchestration, right, or that additional SOAR capabilities, that can totally be part of your, minimal viable product, or what we call MVP day one. But sometimes we do see customers kind of do that crawl, walk, run. We'll get into that in the next slide here. So for security incident response, that core plumbing, as I mentioned, really starting off with defining the personas involved in the process, thinking about who needs to have, maybe security permissions, compartmentalized access, right? Maybe we want to separate who sees what. Start thinking about integrations, right? Bringing those alerts in, right, from our SIM solutions. And then defining, really some of the key data attributes, right? So, for example, how do we categorize security incidents? That's going to be super relevant when it comes time to reporting, right? That's really relevant to when we start defining our playbooks, right? We want to separate phishing from malware, from ransomware, right? Um, Start thinking about when we close security incidents, what are those values we should be focusing on, right? Um, and then getting into defining playbooks. And we often see success where maybe we start off defining one or two, maybe three initial playbooks. Within ServiceNow SecOps, we actually do provide some playbooks off the shelf baseline. And these playbooks, such as our phishing one, can be leveraged, they can be tweaked or enhanced, right, as a starting point to get going. And then thinking about how we're going to measure, our process, looking at things like service level agreements, metrics, prioritization, those security calculators. One of the cool things again is we have the user data, we have the asset data in CMDB. And as security incidents come in and maybe it's associated with a particular user, right, we can leverage that business context, right, to define how important is this to the company, right, that prioritization. And on the next slide, this is, continuing with the core plumbing. We do have the knowledge base articles in security incident response. You can track things like your standard operating procedures, your contact lists, who's responsible for what, and kind of keeping all of that knowledge very neatly documented, right, within ServiceNow. And then looking at how do we want to collaborate with other teams. So the security team might have to collaborate with the help desk team, right? The firewall team, the identity team. And there's many flexible ways of doing this and ensuring folks are notified, but that's really something that we want to define and start to involve these teams early on, right, in that implementation journey. And then wrapping up here, sort of that feedback loop. We have our post-incident review. Oh, sorry, Sarah. Just that last part there. Yeah, so we have questionnaires that we can configure as a security analyst, right? Start closing out and resolving their tickets. Maybe we have visibility gaps, monitoring gaps, and we want to track those so we can improve our process over time. And then lastly, following up with reporting, right? As I mentioned before, we have the standard, reporting how many security incidents do I have now? And we also have the performance analytics, right, which we call PA, which is the trending, right? Week over week, month over month. And then on the next slide, this is where we get into the additional, call it the SOAR, the orchestration, right? Being able to tie these security incidents into threat intelligence, right? Looking at artifacts like IP enrichment, file hash enrichment, connecting to other systems or tools, right? We have integrations, for example, with Microsoft Exchange. We can search and see how many other people got this email, right, from this sender with that subject in the organization. Being able to connect to other log tools like Splunk, being able to connect to tools and say, have you seen this IP in the past 24 hours, right? And we call that the citing search capability. And then on the next slide, just some other resources to call out here in terms of getting help, assistance, establishing, going about your journey. So first we have the partner finder. On the next slide here, there's lots of partners out there with lots of experience, but on the partner finder tool, you can actually search and filter by, particular product. Definitely would suggest looking at this, even working with your account team if you're not sure what partners might already be in the mix at your company. And on the next slide, the expert services, right? And that's where we have, implementation from our consultants at ServiceNow, but we also do support that, in that code delivery model that I mentioned. And then on the next slide, Now Create. So if you're not aware of Now Create, this is a fantastic resource. Much of the resources here actually came from folks that are, implementing the SecOps solutions. We have things like, checklists, success packs, scoping guides. The process guide is a very valuable resource to really understand, how do I go about operationalizing, SIR or VR. The workshop guide, which is really, very early on as you're starting to think about, how do I define my requirements, that workshop guide has a lot of cool insights and tidbits there. And then, of course, the starter user stories, which are sort of, you can leverage what's there and extend them, really get your journey kicked off with those, I'll call them cheat or starter user stories.
All right. Thanks so much, Andy. That was fantastic. We're just going to head into our final section now. I'll take the mic back over. Reminder, add questions to the Q&A if you have any. We'll make sure we get those answered or follow up on them afterwards. But now we want to spend just a little bit of time on the why. So why should you start your implementation for SecOps if you haven't already? And sort of what kind of value can you expect to see by getting started? Of course, I'm going to open it up with another poll just to see where people are at in terms of top desired business outcomes. What are you aiming to achieve as you begin your implementation? What do you think is the highest priority? Maybe it's accelerating your response to security incidents, to critical vulnerabilities, reducing the effort to resolve security incidents, reducing the attack surface. These are just a few that are, big areas of priority for people, but you can definitely add some to the chat if you have other things that are top of mind. We always love to hear that. Give it a few more seconds here to make sure everyone that wants to participate can respond to this final poll. All right, so dying down, I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up now and share that out. So quite split across the board. People are definitely interested in all of these types of outcomes and a couple other ones too, which is great. So thank you for participating in that. I'm going to go ahead and proceed into the content here. So good news, we've definitely seen those types of outcomes. You can definitely achieve them depending on what your priorities are. And our customers have certainly been able to get to those types of results. And importantly, within, a relatively short amount of time. So within 6 months of going live. And just to highlight a few, we have, for example, analysts closing almost 2 times the number of security incidents on average at just 6 months of usage. We'll definitely see more of that to come with Now Assist for SecOps, so we'll have to update this in the coming months. Another one, cutting mean time to remediate a vulnerability in half in just 6 months. And our best-in-class customers are achieving even greater results. So these are definitely the types of things that we're here to support you through and help you achieve. And at ServiceNow, our security team is customer zero and definitely big users of our applications and have moved from using manual, labor-intensive processes to respond to vulnerabilities to using VR. And that has certainly led to a lot of great outcomes, including, more than 99% accuracy in assigning vulnerabilities, really high SLA attainment, and in this particular slide, we're showing an 85% gain in productivity. So great results. Definitely, they are big champions of SecOps solutions. And so we love to share some of their outcomes with our customers and partners. So similarly, on the security incident response side, our internal security team has gained a lot of value from moving things from a manual process to being able to prioritize and automate more things. So lots of staffing costs that you can see here, thousands of hours saved. Like I said, more to come with Now Assist. So again, just we are active users of our product. We're always taking in feedback, of course, from customers, partners, but also from our customer zero, so ServiceNow security as well. Now, when it comes to getting to those results that you want to achieve, really setting your vision and outcomes is an important first step in your implementation. So these are just some of the examples of the outcomes that you can choose to prioritize in your SecOps implementation. And many customers will initially select one or two outcomes that relate to their key challenges and choose to prioritize those for their implementation, and then be able to select the appropriate metrics to measure their progress. And there are a number of resources on Now Create that Andy was speaking to, and we'll share in the chat as well, which include those informations on outcomes and metrics that you can reference as well. And we do have a community post that sort of summarizes some of the top ones as well. And so as you do explore the value that you want to get out of SecOps and create that vision for your organization, here's some of the resources that we want to call out. So first thing is the Customer Success Center. And this is really your one-stop shop to search across all of the different ServiceNow resources, be it docs, leading practices resources, all sorts of tools that are out there, and learn more about the methodology of Now Value, which is a framework to envision and create and validate value from your products that you're using and champion your success. Now, there is a revamp going on. There's a new leading practices library that's coming soon. So check back on Customer Success Center to find more resources in the near future. Something else that has always been hosted on the Customer Success Center that again is getting a revamp. So stay tuned for the new value calculator, but this is essentially a resource that we find very helpful for people to try to have this like quick and easy way to see what the annual business value is that they can achieve in their organization by using different ServiceNow solutions, be it one or be it multiple. So for instance, the old calculator, you could filter for security operations and see the difference that implementing it would make from a monetary perspective. And so, as I mentioned, that is getting a revamp, but stay tuned, check back to the Customer Success Center in the next month or so, and you should see some updates there. Lastly here, what if you have ServiceNow Impact? So this is a value acceleration solution that's designed to maximize the value that you get out of your investment with ServiceNow. And there are a range of different packages with varying offerings. I'll just sort of flash this up on the screen. This shows a little bit more detail about the different types of offerings that customers can get with Impact. This is really like the total package with the full range of things. So you have things like a designated squad, value recommendations, additional added technical support, and special discounts on things like training and expert services. So if you're interested in learning more or getting more information about Impact, you can reach out to your account executive or customer success manager, and they can sort of guide you towards that. Now that sort of brings us to the end of our prepared content for the session. This is just a quick summary of some of the key places that we mentioned to go to for more resources on getting started with SecOps, which we'll share in the chat. Again, feel free to put any additional questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those in the next 10 to 15 minutes before we close out the event. Before we do get to the Q&A though, I do want to mention that, again, this is part of our Live on ServiceNow program, so you can access the registration to our events from our community page under the events tab. You can also scan the QR code here to sort of see what are the upcoming ones and how to register for those. Like I mentioned, in a couple of weeks, I think it's November 20th, we have our open forum office hours, so anything goes. Bring your questions, and we have experts on those sessions to help answer those. And then we do regularly run these getting started and office hours monthly. So stay tuned and feel free to attend in the future as well.